Good morning, viewers. Thank you very much. Welcome to Punchline Africa Television, broadcasting from the Political Command Center in London. Thank you very much, viewers across the continent of Africa, from Tripoli to Cairo to Johannesburg to Cape Town, Kampala, Asmara, Khartoum, Juba, Kigali, Rwanda, Kinshasa, Ngoma, Kisangani, Bangui, Accra. Good morning. Across the continent of Africa, those viewers watching us, this is Punchline Africa Television, together with Punchline Africa radio station that broadcasts live from Nairobi, in the capital city of Kenya, Nairobi. I am Dr. David Matsanga from the London Command Center. Good morning, all of you. It's about 22 minutes past 8 o'clock here, and it is 22 minutes past 11 o'clock in East African Standard Time in Nairobi. Today we have a show lined up for you. Sudan. The country of Sudan has had turmoil. And shall we ever have a peaceful transition? This is the only country in Africa that have seen demonstrations, riots on the streets for almost 3 years. People have not left the streets of Khartoum and other cities. Shall we ever have a peaceful transition in Sudan? We shall look at that. And good morning in Nairobi, Kenya, Mr. Pambe wa Makanga Pambe. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Dr. David Matsanga from London headquarters. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you very much. You take us through the headlines, and I repeat the headlines of all African news, those regional that you have got copies of, starting from the Republic of Kenya. The newspapers in Kenya, what do they say? The Daily Nation, the Standard, the Star, the Business Daily, the People, and many other publications that come from that country. What do they say? This is Matsanga, Africa Perspective, Matsanga Global Trends, Matsanga, everything is here. And when you look at the security front, the frontline security, our show is coming in next week on Monday, frontline security. What can we do to reduce the elements of terrorism on African continent? I will be looking at that topic on Monday morning, and from the studios of my great friend in Nairobi. Thank you very much. I land the mic and take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Matsanga. Good morning, our dear viewers of Punchline Africa Television. We go direct to the newspaper review. We start with the Star newspaper. The main headline is Iyala hopefuls hustle MPs as voting looms. And we have the Standard newspaper. MPs set stage for big clash with CJ Koome, Chief Justice Koome. On the Daily Nation newspaper, how Jubilee to a 32 billion shillings laptop project flopped. That is on story on the Daily Nation. And we have a story on a new vision of Uganda across the African continent, where government issues new rules for cities and districts. We have a daily news from Tanzania, where the headline is, here are state directives. We have state directives that have been provided by President Samia Suluhu there. Then we go to the Namibian, where parliament is in jeopardy. That is a story that will be found on page 2 of the Namibian newspaper. Then we have Pretoria news from South Africa. The headline is, government facing 3% salary hike revolt. A story on page 10 of the Pretoria news newspaper. Then we have daily news from Egypt. The main headline is, Egypt's FM receives UAE's industry minister. Egypt's FM receives United Arab Emirates industry minister. And on the Nation newspaper from Nigeria, Tinubu says, I'm not seeking office on religious grounds. Our story is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper from Nigeria. We have the Punch newspaper still from Nigeria. The main headline here is friends criticizing me lobbied for vice president slot, Tinubu says, and the story is on page 2 of the Punch newspaper from Nigeria. We have the Sun from Namibia. The main headline here is government wants 40 million naira, and we have from Social Security Kitty on page 4 of the Sun newspaper from Namibia. You have Sowetan newspaper. Sowetan newspaper is from South Africa, and the main headline here is Tenderpreneur Gogo Speaks. This is a story on page 3 of the Sowetan newspaper. We have Daily News story. The main story here from Zimbabwe is Moyo and Zuwao ring up ZANU-PF. The story is on page 2 of the Daily News newspaper from Zimbabwe. We have The Citizen from Tanzania, which the main headline is VP's 10 directives on water sources and climate change. The story is on page 2 of the Citizen newspaper from Tanzania. And then you have Daily Monitor from Uganda. The main headline here is government releases new schools calendar. The story is on page 4 of the Daily Monitor newspaper from Uganda. You have the Herald from Zimbabwe, where steel giant injects millions into Zim. That is the main headline of the Herald newspaper. You have Business Daily from South Africa, where the main headline is Ramaphosa gets Falafala reprieve. You find that story on page 5 of the Business Day newspaper from South Africa. Thank you so much, Dr. Matsanga from London. You take it over for the London newspapers.
Thank you very much. Before I go to London newspapers, I would like us to look at the story of the Herald in Zimbabwe. Moyo and Zawo write to ZANU-PF to apologize. It is a moment for me, a very great, laughable moment, that a few years ago, Professor Jonathan Moyo, who left Zimbabwe, one of the architects of bad governance in Zimbabwe, has now written back to the ZANU-PF. This is a good spirit, and I'm very humbled, and I encourage Professor Jonathan Moyo, wherever you are, start going back. Let's see what you can produce. You have been a ZANU-PF member. That is a very big boost for my friend A.D. Mnangagwa, whom I told a long time ago that let's initiate a dialogue with people, so that dialogue alone can change things. That would be very good for us. And that is a good sign for me, the Herald newspaper in Zimbabwe and the Daily newspaper. Moyo and the nephew of Robert Mugabe, the late Robert Mugabe's nephew, have written to ZANU-PF apologizing and saying, we are sorry, we injured the party, but we want to be back. That's very good politics in Africa. And Professor Jonathan Moyo, I encourage you to do so. Shake hands. Even if you don't go back to that same place, you are a well-known teacher, international specialist. You can do your work anywhere. Just as some of us did shake hands with President Museveni. I think you saw my picture with President Museveni in 2008. And I said, that's the end of it. No acrimony, no more quarrels, no more violence. Nothing will ever happen again. Whatever happens will not take me back to the root of agitating for freedom through any violent means. I will discuss and floor you on argument intellectually, but never shall we have guns in our country called Uganda. Professor Jonathan Moyo, I want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for having taken this step towards normalization of relationship with ZANU-PF, such that You can lead, you can go back and build a nation. Don't call for sanctions against a nation. A nation with sanctions does not function. Thank you very much, Professor Jonathan Moyo, comrade. May God give you strength. And thank you very much, Idi Mnangagwa, for accepting. Don't put conditions. That is how Africa politics should be. But don't kill people. Don't just call people and kill them. Just talk to people and they will understand. But don't threaten to kill and do other methods underhand to say we want to come and then go, you have this, frame charges, frame this. No. That is the type of politics. I'm very impressed with His Excellency E.D. Emerson Mnangagwa, and I will be online tomorrow to call him to say thank you very much. You have taken a step forward to make sure that there is reconciliation, total reconciliation in this country. There is total reconciliation in our countries. Africa does not need to be retributive. Retributive justice in Africa can never be an answer to our problems. It only increases our plight, the worst plight that ever be. Good morning, Tawish.
Good morning, Dr. Matsanga. Good morning to Javan Karanja, I believe, and also Mpampe from our communication headquarters. And greetings to all our viewers who are watching our program here in Kenya, Africa, and indeed the rest of the world. It is my pleasure to join you on this program, Dr. Matsanga.
Thank you very much. How is the weather in Narok? It seems you are in a jacket, not a jacket today. It looks like the weather in Narok. How is it? And the animals seem to be very relaxed. Tell us more about Narok.
It's fairly warm, Dr. Matsanga, this morning because again we haven't had quite some showers, save for yesterday. So that's why you see I'm in lighter clothing this morning. That means it's not that very cold this morning, Dr. Matsanga. It's fairly good climate.
Oh, it is very good. That's why you are not in your jacket. Javan Karanja across in Nanyuki, how is the weather there? And how are you? Good morning, Javan Karanja.
Good morning, Dr. David Matsanga and Tawish. It's a pleasure being on Punchline Africa Television. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Across the bridge, there is no sorrow. That is the song that we can use right now. Across the bridge, there is no sorrow. Okay, thank you very much, viewers. We continue with the British newspapers, but anybody who has a comment on that issue of Moyo, Tawish?
Dr. Matsanga, not to say so much, but again, I think this is a good step forward in bringing together the leadership in Zimbabwe. Because again, what is more important, even as politicians jostle for political power and office, it is about the greater interest of the people. And so when you have, of course, people who are from opposite, from the different political divide really coming together, to have a discussion, to have a roundtable discussion and negotiations, and to reconcile politically, Dr. Matsanga. I think it's a great step forward because by the end of the day, building a country is not for the responsibility of one person. It calls each and every one of us, regardless of your political persuasion, that we can put our foot forward and see what is it that we can contribute for the betterment of our nation. So I think what Jonathan Moyo has done in Zimbabwe is a good step. And also for President Emerson Mnangagwa to embrace him, for those who are in power and most of those who feel like they won, most of the times they will not have a chance or opportunity to give to those they flawed or those they feel like they are political nemesis. But in this case, we also must thank President Emerson Mnangagwa for coming out and embracing him and seeing what the best way forward in bringing the people of Zimbabwe together and how best they can consolidate the ideas they have and use the same for the betterment of the livelihood and the lives of the people of Zimbabwe. This is a very good gesture, Dr. Matsanga. And we will want to see this gesture being replicated with other political leadership, be it opposition, really coming together. The likes of Chamisa and others, they should now have some reasoning and find it worth really to come to the table and say they bury the hatchet and now build a country. When the time comes for a political contestation again, they go to the field and try to sell their vision and idea to the people. Whosoever idea will be bought by the people, then that is the person who will definitely lead the nation. You don't necessarily have to be in power or to be in that seat of power for you to be able to really give your ideas or to give services to your people. There are so many ways we can do this and contribute for the development and growth of our nation. And I think this is just that one greater testament that the leadership in Zimbabwe is trying to embrace, Dr. Matsanga. And I think we in the African continent must also try to emulate this. And I think it was it present the immediate former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, and Raila Amolo Odinga, when they decided to bury the hatchet in 2018 and work together. Those who it took the whole world by surprise. People could not believe that these people who really were in opposing political camps in 2 consecutive elections could bury the political hatchet and work together for the betterment of a nation. So I think it's a great step forward, Dr. Matsanga.
Thank you very much, my brother. Thank you very much for creating a climate of that nature. Jafari Karanja, any comment on that? Jonathan Moyo and the nephew of late President Mugabe have written to apologize to the ZANU-PF for the mischiefs and other things that they did, or the hashtags they created against the party. What's your comment? If it's still very far, what's your comment, Mpambe?
Yeah, of course, this is a show of a fact that unity of purpose is very important for the development of a nation, rather for a nation to move forward. And therefore, I would urge that Dr. Chamisa is also brought on board so that he joins those people who have actually, or rather those leaders who have come up to unite the nation in a way or the other. This also should be emulated by other African countries which have had issues here and there, perhaps in disagreement with the opposition here and there, so that we put the country forward and for the benefit of the people, not for the selfish interest.
A comment on this before we move? The question of Moyo saying, I'm sorry, to ZANU-PF.
Thank you very much, Dr. David Matsanga. And it's quite encouraging when we see our African leaders coming together for the sake of the people and coming to forge a way forward that will benefit the people of Zimbabwe. Therefore, it's a great move. And when we had the famous handshake in our country, as Tarish was saying, we experienced tremendous development across the country. Therefore, I hope the people of Zimbabwe will also enjoy an atmosphere of peaceful coexistence and an atmosphere where leaders will concentrate on the agenda to better the livelihoods of the people of that great country. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. And we are joined by Saxon Vima from Harare, Zimbabwe. Saxon, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay, Doctor. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
How are you, panelists? Yes.
We are talking about Zimbabwe and Jonathan Moyo and Zoe for reacting to ZANU-PF. Isn't it a great significance, change of heart? What is your comment?
I think it was long overdue. Professor Jonathan Moyo realized that he was in the wilderness. And yeah, it's a step in the right direction. People have to come together, coalesce around a common cause. And I thought after Operation Stolegas, they thought things were not going to work out well for the new administration. But they've come to the realization that Emerson Mnangagwa is delivering in terms of infrastructure, only yesterday we connected a new power plant, which is Wange 7, which is under 300 megawatts, that were added to the national grid. So this kind of infrastructure development, people like Mo and Joao had no option but to admit and agree that the nation has to move forward, putting aside the pet issues. It's a step in the right direction. For Jonathan Mo, he was man enough, given what he had said, and we embrace everyone. We are Zimbabweans. We might differ on opinions, but coming together and realizing that someone made a mistake, we need to do the one nation. That's what we want. We don't need to delve on pet issues. And I think moving forward, that's what Africa needs, not to be used by these Western guys who try to drive a wedge way over petty differences. I submit.
How are the people in Zimbabwe reacting to such good news? For me, I am relieved.
Yeah.
I am relieved because I told President Mnangagwa when I met him on several occasions, I said, let's embrace a handshake. Let's look out for people. They are brainy people like Walter Muzembe, Jonathan Moyo, and others who have gone out, who are ZANU-PF members. Some of us have gone through the same process. Some of us were not talking to President Museveni, myself personally, until 2008, when we embraced and shook hands in front of cameras, international cameras, and all diplomats, all people, presidents, about 4 of them were present. We finished. We moved on. The country needs, Africa needs to change tactic. Africa needs to change the way politics is done. Politics of confrontation does not pay. It creates a crisis, like the crisis we see in Sudan, like the crisis we see right now in DRC Congo, like the crisis we see in Somalia, in Ethiopia, because people don't talk. People should start talking, and I'm very glad for his Professor Jonathan Moyo, comrade. It is good, it is well. That is a step forward for reconciliation. Things do happen, but you cannot mourn about Hitler all the time. Germany has to move on. Thank you very much, my dear comrades and the panel from Harare. So what is the view on the streets? Are people happy?
The people who are from the pro-government, they're saying like, this is a step in the right direction. And all other neutrals, they said, I think that's what we need. But the guys from the opposition, they said, I think maybe that's why we didn't have to impress him. He was a chameleon, that type of character. But these guys, they wanted people to remain in an acrimonious situation. So to them, they're not happy. But they're the minority. You cannot make everyone happy. That's not normal. No two people can agree on almost everything unless one of them is thinking. That's the honest view, the honest opinion. They're entitled to it, but the majority, they are embracing, they're happy about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Saxon Vima from Harare, Zimbabwe. The great land of Zimbabwe. I've struggled for this country 22 years, and I feel so. There is something I wanted to ask you, Saxon. When you see Tony Blair coming to Harare, what do you think? What do you feel in your blood?
We won't be happy because these guys, they never liked us. And why don't repent? No one will embrace that kind of guy. I think for the crisis that we are in, it's because of Tony Blair. Whenever when he became the prime minister, he drove the wedge between Harare and London, involved. A diplomatic role was externalized. So I think he's an American person. I think you look at this Iraq issue, he cannot be trusted. It's caused a lot of problems. Look at what he's done in Malawi. So those are not kind of people that we cannot tolerate. We cannot, if we can, of course, we greet them, but we view them with suspicion. We have to be, you cannot sleep with both eyes open with such kind of people. You have to be keeping one eye open with the likes of Blair. Thank you.
What advice would you give to people who would like to hire him elsewhere? Because you have seen the mess that has come in Malawi.
My advice is they need to treat whatever advice they get with a pinch of salt and be on the lookout, because these are double-edged swords and like two-headed snakes. They never liked us, and I think we need to see what's so important now that they would want to help us. Why, if they couldn't help us when he was in power? What's so special is how can he advise now when he doesn't have power? Meaning, you might be doing the bidding for the M15, MI6 CIA, and these are the GSHQ. You know, these guys will remain part of the establishment. They would never do anything that will undermine their home nations. They have to undermine their so-called superiority complex. Whatever they will do, they give you solutions that will perpetuate their hegemony, they perpetuate their dominance of us. So people need to be aware with the kind of advice from those kind of people who were former colonizers. They never liked us. Look at how the IMF a structural adjustment program, how they caused poverty in Africa. We need to view these guys and they treat whatever they do with a pinch of salt. Be on the lookout, be cautious of whatever policies advice they give us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother Saxon Vima from Zimbabwe, Harare, for that. Let's quickly go through the British newspapers. The Sun, Tony charged over 232 bets. This guy was betting for Football Association Acts days after a striker dropped from the World Cup. He was fixing matches. Now, the Daily Telegraph says, we will face into storm, says Hunt, as taxes surge. It's an economic meltdown. Tomorrow we might look at the economic meltdown of the region. We want to visit this topic. It looks it has come true. There is a world economic meltdown where we need to see supply lines, supply chains are being broken. And the money is becoming very, very expensive in Britain, in Europe, the entire America. Things are not as good as we think. Thank you very much. Let's move on to another newspaper. Another newspaper, that's the Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph. The Guardian says millions face rise in energy bills as Hunt lifts price cap. Energy now, the gas, the electricity in Britain is very expensive. You cannot have one situation where you can last long with 20 pounds. We used to pay 20 pounds for about a week, but now a week you need about 120 pounds to survive. The Daily Mail talks about supermarkets to ration eggs. This is the time that Africa can export eggs to the supermarkets in London. Uganda has eggs. Kenya and Uganda are fighting over eggs. While in Britain, the eggs are going to be rationed. So those who eat eggs, oh my God, prepare yourselves that eggs in Britain here, they are going to be rationed. So why don't we arrange that airlines from Kenya, from Uganda, start arranging on how to airlift eggs, good African eggs without problems that can be eaten in the United Kingdom. This is the time to make money. Also, as the meltdown catches the superpowers, this is when you can say Africa is prepared to be a vanguard of the revolution. Another newspaper is the Daily Express. D-Day for UK hands fair and honest plan to fix the future. Is going to speak about the budget today. Is going to speak about so many things. So here we are, we wait for him to tell us how much he's going to raise on taxes, which are killing most of the people in the United Kingdom. The Mirror says spies foil Iran plot to murder British nationals. It is sad that Iran up to today is plotting to kill people instead of plotting to make the better world. That is very sad. Green and bear it. Green and bear it. Green and bear it. It is going to be the Metro newspaper, which is a free newspaper in London, talks about let's bear the brunt in summary of what the taxes are going to be. We are going to pay through our noses. We are going to pay through our taxes, our ceilings. We have to be prepared to pay this. Now, coming on this backdrop, and all of you now, I put a question, and I need quick answers. Are we coming back to the same meltdown? Is Africa not going to feel the same pinch? That is the question. Is Africa not going to feel the same pinch? Have you seen eggs in London are going to be rationed? Eggs. I saw Kenya and Uganda sometime fighting over too many eggs coming from Uganda. This is the right time President Museveni should order his farmers and exporters to ask if the eggs that are in Uganda can be eaten in the acid and use supermarkets in United Kingdom. You can make money. As much as the conditions are there, you can fulfill the conditions and make money. That's why Pan-Africa and Punchline Africa TV is always everywhere. The nose is everywhere. I bring it to Africa, baby. Thank you very much. Thank you. Back to you in the studio in Nairobi. That is all we have this way. As we take a break, we want to take a break and come up top of the hour. We want to look at Sudan. What went wrong after the overthrow of Bashir? Is there a way to a peaceful transition? Let's take a breaker. Give us some relief of rest, and then we come back. Be prepared to take on the topic Sudan. It has been in turmoil. Protesters have been on the streets throughout. Can we resurrect this country from the ravages of war, of military coups? 2 of them have occurred since Bashir was overthrown. Can we remove this country from it? Where are the civilians? Why are people still on the streets? That's what we want to find out. Are you ready with the clip? Let's go.
Yes.
Fellow Africans, since 1957, when Ghana gained independence, there has been quite a lot of political, social, economic indicators on the African continent that show that Africa has progressed from pre-independence Africa to post-independence Africa.
Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. From now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
66 years down the road, Africa finds itself with the first country, Ghana, having gained independence. We find ourselves still locked up, controlled, manipulated, instructed, logistically supplied, equipped by foreign powers that dictate our agenda. Africa is endowed with plenty of minerals, resources, good weather. The climate is so favorable for the growth of food enough to sustain us. But we find ourselves in countries where hunger is killing people. Hunger is killing people because most of the people have taken to arms to fight wars, conflicts. starvation has taken the place of development in most African countries like Sudan, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Nigeria, in Biafra, and the north of Nigeria there is Boko Haram, Somalia in the Horn of East Africa. We have taken to conflict instead of development. Development was the key indicator. When Kwame Nkrumah made the first speech that seek ye African political unity, economic development will come automatically, he was right. The events happening in Libya today vindicates Nkrumah, vindicates Nyerere, Sekou Toure, and Nasser, the founding fathers of our Pan-Africanism. The events happening in Central African Republic, in Congo today, as the war of rebels ranges on between the rebel and the rebels and the government and the rebels vindicates the founding fathers of this revolution. Our independence, therefore, was only on paper. Our independence, therefore, was only in symbols. Our independence also was in signs. Our independence also was in boundaries. That we received our flags, but we never received full independence as by the word independence. Most of the 3/4 of African countries, French-speaking countries, have their budgets being done in Paris. Is that independence? The Paris government or the French government does its budgets based on how much they will get from African countries. Is that independence? Is this the Africa that you want? Is it the Africa that we must look at? Is it the Africa that we shall leave for the future generation? If the answer to you is yes, then so be it. But if the answer is no, you agree with me that this is not the Africa we want to live for the future generation. Our generations and the future generation need to find a legacy. What is the legacy that Africa and African Union will leave for the future generation? The wars ranging in Libya, in South Sudan, in Khartoum, in Mogadishu, in DRC Congo, in Amazonia, in Cameroon, Boko Haram, Mali, in Mauritania, the uprisings in Algeria, all point to one thing, that yes, we are not yet independent. We are still controlled by external forces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, viewers. That is a very good opener for us on this show. This is Matsanga Global Trends, coming to you from London, the command center and the headquarters. And in Nairobi, we have Mpambe Wapambe Makanga. We have Javani Karanja in Nanyuki. We have Tawish Olesesana in Narok. And we have Sexton Vima in Zimbabwe, Harare. Ladies and gentlemen, and those watching us, this show always brings out aspects of every Africa, what Africa we want. Today's topic is Sudan. The Sudanese people took power from Bashir. The military overthrew President Bashir, removed him from power, put him on trial. The trial is still going on. Some cases have collapsed, but he's still in custody. A second military coup took place in October 2021, and the Sudanese Freedom Party that negotiates with the military is still engaging the military to find a peaceful transition. This transition has not come with hardships. What are the obstacles that the Freedom Party or those who went on the streets to demonstrate, Forces for Freedom of Change, FFC, what do they want? What demands have they put forward? Are these demands workable? Can they bring peace? Can they bring a peaceful transition in Sudan? Those are the issues we want to look at. What other obstacles? Sudan faces external interference from very many actors that want Sudanese oil. Remember, we still have a problem of the Abyei Peninsula, where we have sacked very strong army of African forces that are guarding the Abyei Peninsula, where most of the oil in Sudan and the south and the north is gathered. This oil is drawn out, it goes to Port Said. But Sudan acts as a strategic point of view on the Great Lakes region that never has it ever liked Kenya to build its lap set. Because if Kenya built the lap set, then Sudan and the Port Sudan would have nothing to export. For students of international and regional politics, but take down the notes that the failure by the French, the same French people who have interest in Sudanese oil, Total oil is very much present in the oil in Abyei Peninsula. The French are very much present in Khartoum. I remember when I went to Khartoum at the conference of all African Supreme Court judges, Chief Justices. I addressed the African Chief Justice together in the presence of President Bashir then. When we retreated to the palace, Bashir called us for a dinner, and they called me to meet him in the palace. I went to meet him in the palace. We sat down in the palace and we were talking about the ICC indictments, because I had given a very good speech and educated the African judges on why ICC is a predicament and should not be agreed, but you should use your own local mechanisms to try your leaders. I remember Bashir telling me that he has contracted French companies to clean up the River Nile banks and to clean up Khartoum city. They have been given a contract. I looked at President Bashir like this. I said, Your Excellency, do you know that Bashir, Your Excellency Bashir, do you know that the French are the ones that pay International Criminal Court to arrest you? He said, huh? Yes. Why? How come that my Minister of Justice has never told me this? I said, if he hasn't told you this, Your Excellency, the French are not the best people that you can deal with on African continent. You can't give them contract when they want you in the prison. Viewers, the matter went further. He called the Minister of Justice. We were with the Chief Justice of, the late Chief Justice of Sudan, who has passed away, seated, and he said, let's go out and have dinner. When I entered something that I cannot tell you here, because it touches one of the judges in your country, Kenya, who thought that I was a small person, I should go that side and I should not follow them. But I was picked from the crowd and brought to the high table near Bashir to sit and eat with the president, and the judge again, who said I was a wrong man, sat very far. So this is the life Jesus was talking about. When you go to some feasts, don't first go for the first table. Go behind and then be cold. Coming back to the point, I picked up from Bashir that he still had a lot of respect for the French. But later on, it turned out, as he was doing that, the French were pulling for him. And as a result of the ICC indictments, Sudan has suffered an economic meltdown. Sanctions have been put on Sudan. Whether the military removes Bashir or not, still sanctions are still biting Sudan. That is one of the places in Africa, as much as Zimbabwe cries of sanctions, you should know that there is another country in Africa which is heaped with sanctions, where the natives have no good life because of the sanctions that have been heaped on them. I have been a friend of all the generals, especially the Deputy General Doglo and General Bruhan. These are friends that I knew long time ago, and I know them. They are very good people. They understand the situation, the plight of Sudan. When they wanted to hand over Bashir to the ICC, I wrote a letter. I think you saw the letter. The headquarters in Nairobi can tell you. I had that letter. You can, if you can look for it, you'll get it. I protested and I told them, if you hand over Bashir, the next time they are going to come and hand you in. Burhan agreed with me, and he did not take Bashir across to the ICC. My point, therefore, is the obstacles after the overthrow of General Bashir, created by the overthrow and created by freedom, the force for freedom and the change in Sudan. The issues between the two sides have not been resolved. And I would like to take a seat and ask Nairobi to start reading exactly the background to this conflict. Then we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, let's prepare to shoot answers and questions and comments, supplement what is the best unit, how far we are today.
All right.
Over to you, Pambe. I land the mic.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Matsanga from the London headquarters. Welcome so much, our dear viewers. And to the background, Sudan's Forces of Freedom and Change, that is FFC coalition, said on Wednesday it was seeking to sign a framework agreement with the military as a first step to ending the political deadlock that has gripped the country since an October 2021 coup. The military takeover ended a partnership with the FFC following the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir and plunged the country into political and economic turmoil. The coalition and military began talks with international backing in recent weeks, and General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan this week confirmed that the military had presented its notes on a draft constitution. In Wednesday's statement, the coalition said it had reached understandings with the military based on their discussions. A high-level military source said that understandings had been reached, but there remained some pending issues. The statement said that the coalition will seek to sign a framework agreement with the military and other political forces that will form a constitutional basis for a civilian democratic transitional authority. Before signing a final agreement, the group said the broader discussions will be held on 4 main issues, and transitional justice, security sector reform, revision of the Juba Peace Agreement, and the dismantling of the Bashir regime are part of the major issues that they're talking about. These issues have been cited by members of the coalition and analysts as key sources of tension between the military and civilians that culminated into the coup. And the Sudan's complex crisis has at least 14.3 million Sudanese in need of humanitarian assistance in 2022, leaving up to 13.4 million people in 2021 in comparison. This comes after months of mounting tensions between the military and civilian authorities. Protesters have been in the streets denouncing the takeover, and troops have opened fire. That is part of the introduction to the topic, and we ask the question, what are the obstacles to a peaceful transition? Thank you, Dr. Matsanga.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
What are the obstacles to the peaceful transition? Tawish, what do you think are the obstacles? I have mentioned some of them: the ICC, the external forces, interests that always come in to disorganize the system as it wants to go to transition. The clans also, there is a lot of ethnicity, tribal wars. The people of Bahazel, the people of North, the black of the South. You know, the South Sudan was cut in the middle, but in top, the Abyei Triangle, we have black people who still think they are not part and parcel of the entire Sudan. Do you think there are external forces, especially Saudi Arabia, France, Norway, the countries, America, apart from sanctions put on South Sudan that no trading, banks were frozen, bank accounts were frozen? Is there any other factor that you know of?
Dr. Matsanga, first and foremost, it will be naive for anyone really to imagine that there aren't external forces in as far as the problem in Sudan is concerned. We all appreciate that, and it's been the case, and especially with the ouster of the then President Omar al-Bashir in the year 2019. But away from that, Dr. Matsanga, I also believe that in as much as there could be these external players who are hell-bent in making sure that we are not going to have a peaceful transition or a civilian administration in Sudan. There's also a lot to be talked about in as far as the leaders in Sudan themselves are concerned, especially the military-leaning leadership. And I think when you look into the demonstrations and protests that we've been greeted to in Sudan, for the past years, ever since President Omar al-Bashir was ousted from power, it is very apparent, Dr. Matsanga, that the populace in Sudan are very key in installing a civilian administration, and the military isn't really coming out. I mean, it's not coming out explicitly to register commitment in terms of making sure that we are, one, going to have a peaceful transition and a civilian administration for that matter. And when you look into the demands of the protesters and the demonstrators and the ordinary people in Sudan, they have been very clear on what exactly they want for peace to reign in Sudan. One, they will not want the military to participate in anything to do with the leadership or taking the governance of Sudan, especially after the ouster of President Omar al-Bashir. And so even before we start pointing our fingers outside, of course we know Saudi Arabia and other external forces have played a very, very critical role in seeing the kind of instability, the demonstrations and the conflict in Sudan today. There's also much to be said about the internal leadership and internal affairs, and more so which appears to be in the hands of the military. So if we are to make any step towards having any, say, a narrow hope of having a peaceful transition in Sudan, let's begin by the military really allowing the civilian administration really to take over. And I think, Dr. Matsanga, that has been the major headache even coming from the protesters. But it must also be called out on the external players who first and foremost really made sure that President al-Bashir was ousted unceremoniously from power, and they continue to meddle affairs in Sudan until when? Because it's not that the people of Sudan will want to be in an ending conflict, an ending war, as it was since 2019 up to today. But we will want to see really peace and tranquility return to Sudan. But that can only happen if we remove the hand of the external players, and also the military officials are seeing the importance and the significance of having a complete civilian rule and authority in Sudan. Until we do that, Dr. Matsanga, we may not be, I mean, it's not in the near sight really to have a peace or a peaceful transition in Sudan. I submit, Atari.
Okay, thank you very much. Javani Karanja, I see you on and off. Let me go to Harare in Zimbabwe. Any comments? What are the obstacles? What new challenges that the military and the civilian government, those who need a transition to civilian, face in Khartoum? Any solutions? Javani Karanja. As they sort out their phones and their communication, let's continue to see, look at the question of ICC, for example. The commanders who took power in the military coup are the same commanders who commanded the Darfur war. So there came a complex situation. If you handle Bashir, you have come, we were asking any obstacles that you see in Sudan having a smooth transition. Saxon.
Okay. First and foremost, the Sudanese peace deal is somehow skewed in the sense that the two main groups refused to endorse it. That is the SPLM-N, led by Abdul Aziz Anu Hilu, and the SLMWN, led by Abdul Wahid Anu. They refused to endorse the deal, meaning there's no they felt that the peace deal leaves everything somehow flawed in the deteriorating economic situation in the donor fatigue. Some of them obstacles that are contributing to fragile peace deal. The endorsing of foreign support through establishing ties with Israel is created animosity with the hardliners who are pro-Muslims. And the COVID-19 also is in the flood that have happened, also contributed to the economic meltdown, which has somehow affected the peace deal. The ISIS factor cannot be ruled out. It's being funded by Turkey and Saudi Arabia is also a major contributing factor, as the warring parties are somehow funded to continue destabilizing Sudan. The issues, intercommunal clashes also is led to less stability in Khartoum, increasing geopolitical and environmental tensions along the Ethiopian border also has somehow contributed to fragile peace deal. So there are a lot of factors that have been obstacles to continued peace in Sudan. Thank you.
Okay. So the failure of the two groups endorsing the agreement has frustrated the other groups from engaging the military to a peaceful transition. Fair enough. But let's look at external factors. They also have sanctions. The sanctions that have been put on Sudan are similar to sanctions that have been put on Zimbabwe. The Zimbabwe and the Sudan suffer the same fate as far as America is concerned. What do you talk about that, Javani Karanja? Javani Karanja? Okay. The situation in Africa seems to be the same throughout. Let me do a takeaway, then we have done our best. Takeaway. The situation in Africa seems to be the same in most of the countries where the military has taken power and they intend to create transitions. Some of the transitions are very complicated, some are very simple, and I have not seen of late in the last 20 years where the military has handed over power to a civilian situation, except in a few cases where the military only changes hands with another military situation, another coup coming in from another military. This is being witnessed in most African states, especially the French-speaking countries, where military coups and counter-military coups and coups coming in place of smooth transition. There has never been a smooth transition which I have seen on record. But the one of Sudan faces many challenges. A smooth transition where the military is insisting we need a full control that some people cannot be part and parcel of this transition. The force for change in Sudan, therefore faces a long wait in getting this power back to the civilian hands. But what are the obstacles? Sudan faces international sanctions. Their economy is very bad. The economy has gone to nothing but people. It brings only riots on the streets of Khartoum. They don't have foreign exchange. They have no dollar exchange. Sudan has no credit facilities from the Western countries. Obstacle number two, the interference by external interests, namely from France, America, has made it very difficult for the stability of this country called Sudan. How long will this take? We don't know. The next obstacle that Sudan faces is the question of International Criminal Court and President Bashir, whether to hand him over to the ICC or try him in the local tribunal, local court of in Khartoum. It would be very advisable for General Burhan to look at all aspects of which way to go, because the handing over the General Bashir to the ICC will mean that they will come back to hound all of them who took part in the Darfur war. Is it therefore necessary for them to sit down and hammer an agreement that will allow General Bashir to be tried on the soil in Khartoum, since Khartoum has got enough courts and enough judiciary officers who can try crimes against humanity in Khartoum without presenting General Bashir to the International Criminal Court? It is my own observation that these are some of the factors. And of course, the war by the name around that surrounds South Sudan. In South Sudan, there is a fragile peace process. In the east, Ethiopia has a fragile situation. In the north, some parts of Libya, where Libyan border meets Sudan, there is a fragile situation. In Chad, west, there is a very fragile situation where the military and the rebels are still fighting for control of this territory of Chad. The situation, therefore, boils down to how determined the African Union can help a transition in any African country. How long shall we wait for a transition, yet the civilian people are agitating all the time? They are still on the streets every Friday, like tomorrow. There will be more after prayers pouring on the streets. Tear gas canisters have been used. Many of them have got injured, maimed. Some have lost their lives because of demonstrations. Is it time for the West to lift sanctions, especially economic sanctions that they put on Sudan, such that Sudan can have its own access to the European markets and American markets, such that Sudan can trade with other partners in the currency that is recognized by the international banks and International Monetary Fund and other institutions? If this is not done, we risk another problem in Khartoum and in Sudan, where there could be another coup, where there could be a backlash from protesters who have actually for the last 2 years have constantly stayed put in the capital city, Khartoum. Is it the best way? Can there be the best way to a smooth transition in Sudan? The answer is possibly it can. But the only thing to do is to lift sanctions against Sudan, such that this country can facilitate its economic might, can export its goods, trade with other partners without restrictions that the Americans have put on this great country. I land the mic by saying, long live Africa. Africa will shine, rise and shine again if some of these obstacles are removed from some of the major countries that produce food for the rest of the continent, that starvation will be the matter of the past if Sudan is allowed to buy, to dig, to grow, to trade with other countries in the region. I land my mic. Thank you.